The news just dropped and fans can't stop talking about it. Young Ghost and young Tommy are officially cast for Power Origins. This is one of the biggest updates in the entire Power universe because it finally answers a question people have been asking for years. How will we get to see the early days of Ghost and Tommy before they became the legends we know today? The casting of young Ghost and young Tommy is more than just new actors stepping into familiar roles. It's the foundation of the entire Power Origins series. These two characters are the heart of the story, and the show cannot work without them being believable. Ghost, whose real name is James St. Patrick, has always been portrayed as the brains, the strategist, and the man who could balance being both a ruthless hustler and a businessman with big dreams. Tommy, on the other hand, has always been the fire, the unpredictable muscle, the loyal but reckless friend who never backed down from a fight. Whoever plays them in their younger years has to capture all of that raw energy, but at the same time show us something we've never seen before: their innocence, their mistakes, and the moments that shape them into the men we already know. This is why the casting announcement feels so important. Fans have already started picking apart every detail. Do the young actors look like believable teenage versions of Omari Hardwick's Ghost and Joseph Sikora's Tommy? Do they carry the same aura? Can they give us those little mannerisms, those small expressions that make Ghost and Tommy feel real? These questions are everywhere right now, and they highlight just how much pressure is sitting on the shoulders of these young actors. It's not just about playing a role, it's about living up to years of history, fan loyalty, and the powerful storytelling that has made the Power franchise such a cultural hit. Another layer to this casting is how it changes the excitement around Power Origins itself. Before this news, people were curious, but now there's real buzz. Ghost and Tommy's backstory has always been one of the most requested storylines. We've seen glimpses in Raising Kanan, where young Kanan was given the spotlight, but fans kept asking, what about Ghost and Tommy? These two are the backbone of the original Power series, and many fans believe their journey is just as important as Kanan's rise. Now that we know who's going to bring them to life, the anticipation for this show has gone through the roof. The casting also sets the tone for the kind of series this might be. Choosing the right actors means the writers and producers can finally dive deep into the past without holding back. They can explore the pain, the struggles, and the victories of these characters without constantly being compared to their older versions, because now they have faces to attach to their teenage selves. The show has a chance to carve out a new identity while still staying tied to the original Power universe. This is why the announcement isn't just news, it's a game changer for how fans will watch, discuss, and connect with the show moving forward. To really understand why Power Origins is such a big deal, you have to look at where this story fits inside the larger universe. The Power franchise has already given us so many different perspectives on the drug game, loyalty, betrayal, and survival in New York City. We started with the original Power, which followed Ghost at the height of his double life, running nightclubs while secretly controlling one of the most powerful drug operations in the city. Then we were taken backwards in Raising Kanan, where fans got to see the birth of Kanan Stark, the character that 50 Cent himself made legendary. That prequel showed us how someone who seemed untouchable in the original series was once just a young hustler trying to figure out his place in the streets. And now, with Power Origins, the spotlight is finally turning to Ghost and Tommy, the two characters whose partnership, friendship, and eventual betrayal shaped everything that came after. This is more than just filling in a gap in the timeline. It's about seeing the foundation of the Power universe through fresh eyes. Every fan of the original show remembers the chemistry between Ghost and Tommy. They weren't just friends, they were brothers who built their empire side by side. But what we never really saw on screen was how they met, how they earned their stripes, and how they climbed from being kids with nothing to becoming men with everything and eventually nothing again. Power Origins gives the franchise the chance to answer questions that fans have debated for years. How did Ghost become the thinker, the planner, the one who could play chess while everyone else was playing checkers. How did Tommy turn into the loyal soldier who was willing to go to war for his friend, even if it meant losing himself in the process? Placing Power Origins in the timeline means we'll finally be able to see the era that raised them, the original. Power hinted at their past through quick conversations, like stories about hustling on the corner or small nods to jobs they pulled off when they were young. But now, those hints can be turned into full storylines. This isn't about flashbacks anymore. This is about living in their teenage years, when they were still raw, still figuring out who they were, and still making choices that would eventually lead to their rise in the drug game. It's about watching the city through their eyes and feeling the energy of 90s New York, the music, the style, the danger, the grind. The timing also matters because it connects to Raising Kanan, if Kanan's show is about seeing how he became the ruthless, cold figure we knew later. Then Power Origins is the perfect counterbalance. Ghost and Tommy were once Kanan's protégés. In fact, without him, they might not have risen the way they did. But Ghost was always different from Kanan. He had bigger dreams and wanted more than just being feared in the streets. That difference in mindset is what made their relationships so complicated. Power Origins has the chance to show us those early dynamics, not just between Ghost and Tommy, but also between them and Kanan, and maybe even early connections with Tasha, Angela, and others who played major roles later on. This context in the Power universe also raises the stakes for storytelling. Fans know how things end up. They know Ghost becomes a nightclub kingpin, Tommy becomes his right hand, and eventually their bond breaks apart in betrayal and tragedy. But what fans don't know is how it all started. That's where the drama becomes powerful. There's something fascinating about watching a story when you already know the ending. It makes every decision, every small betrayal, every show of loyalty carry even more weight because you can see the seeds of the future being planted. When young Ghost makes his first big move, we'll already know that it leads to the man who was torn between being a hustler and a businessman. When young Tommy throws his fists or goes all in on a risky play, we'll recognize the same reckless loyalty that defined him in adulthood. So when people ask, where does Power Origins fit in? The answer is clear. It's not just a side story, it's the missing chapter. It's the bridge between Raising Kanan and the original Power. It's the part of the saga that will finally let us see how two kids from Queens became the legends who shaped the drug game, and how their brotherhood, strong as it seemed, was always destined to fall apart. When you think about Power, the first names that come to mind are Ghost and Tommy. They're not just characters. They're the foundation of the franchise. Their friendship, their loyalty, their betrayals, every twist in the story connects back to these two men. But Power Origins gives us the chance to step back in time and see them before the titles, before the empire, before the betrayals. It's about Ghost and Tommy as teenagers, navigating the streets of Queens, trying to figure out who they are in a world that doesn't give second chances. Breaking them down as characters is the only way to understand why their casting matters so much and why their backstory has the potential to reshape the way fans view the entire Power universe. Ghost, or James St. Patrick, has always been written as the mind of the operation. Even in the original series, he was the one who could see 10 moves ahead. He wasn't just a drug dealer, he was a strategist. But in his teenage years, Ghost wasn't polished. He didn't have the nightclub, the suits, or the image of a man. Balancing two lives, what Power Origins can show us is the making of that persona, the seeds of his intelligence, his ambition, and his cold decision-making. Teenage Ghost is likely still raw, still figuring out how to turn his natural instincts into real power. And this is where the audience gets to see him struggle, because no matter how smart he was still young, and youth always comes with mistakes. His story will be about how a boy learned to become a man who wanted to be more than the streets, but couldn't escape them no matter how hard he tried. On the other side is Tommy Egan. If Ghost was the brains, Tommy was always the fire. In the original series, Tommy was impulsive, aggressive, and willing to risk it all without thinking twice. But that loyalty he had for Ghost, that bond was what made him one of the most loved characters in the franchise. Seeing Tommy as a teenager means we'll likely witness a kid with no real direction, someone who had anger inside him and no real outlet, someone who was searching for a place to belong. Tommy's relationship with Ghost gave him that place. Ghost was the one who gave Tommy structure, a reason, and a partnership that made him feel like more than just a reckless fighter. In Power Origins, watching Tommy transform from a kid with now aimed to a hustler who would do anything for his brother will be one of the most emotional arcs. It's about showing how Ghost and Tommy weren't just partners in business, they were two broken boys who found family in each other. Their character breakdown isn't just about who they are individually, but also about the dynamic between them. Ghost needed someone who could act when he hesitated. Tommy needed someone who could think when he lost control. Together, they balanced each other out. That's why their friendship lasted as long as it did, and that's also why their eventual split was so painful to watch. In Power Origins, every scene between young Ghost and young Tommy will carry a different kind of weight because the audience already knows where their bond leads. But the beauty of this prequel is that it allows us to see the good years, the years when their friendship was pure, when their loyalty was unshaken, and when they were still building dreams side by side. That another important part of their breakdown is how their families shaped them. Ghost grew up with a deep sense of wanting more. His desire to be bigger than his environment, to be more than just another hustler, came from a place of seeing limitations all around him. Tommy, on the other hand, came from chaos. His family life was unstable, and that instability shaped his personality. Where Ghost craved control, Tommy lived in disorder. These differences didn't drive them apart. Instead, they created a bond that was unbreakable for years. Ghost offered stability, Tommy offered loyalty. Together, they formed something that neither could have built alone. When fans look back at Ghost and Tommy in the original series, they see the outcome: Ghost chasing legitimacy while Tommy clung to the streets. But Power Origins will allow us to see how those paths began to split long before we realized it. Ghost's hunger for something bigger didn't just appear when he opened Truth nightclub, it was always inside him, even as a teenager. Tommy's need to prove himself, his desperation to show he was fearless, wasn't born out of adulthood, it was rooted in his youth. These are the layers that make their character breakdown so rich. They were destined for greatness, but also destined for tragedy, and that tragedy hits harder when you understand the bond they built as kids. So when people say casting Ghost and Tommy is the hardest job in the Power universe, they're not wrong. Whoever steps into these roles has to capture not just the essence of the characters, but the complexity of their friendship. They have to show us the intelligence, the fire, the loyalty, and the pain all in one performance. Ghost and Tommy aren't just names. They are the heartbeat of the story, and Power Origins will finally show us how that heartbeat began. The most exciting part about Power Origins isn't just the casting or the placement in the timeline, it's the endless possibilities for storylines that could shape the show. Because even though fans know how Ghost and Tommy's story eventually ends, what they don't know are the moments that got them there. That's where the magic of this prequel lies. It has the chance to pull back the curtain on the untold years that built one of television's most iconic partnerships. And if done right, the storylines could balance raw street drama with deep emotional layers that keep fans hooked. One of the biggest potential arcs is the origin of their friendship. Ghost and Tommy's bond didn't appear out of nowhere, and fans will finally get to see how two kids from completely different backgrounds found each other. That first meeting, that first hustle, that first test of loyalty, it all matters. The writers could build an entire season around how Ghost and Tommy moved from being just neighborhood kids to brothers willing to die for each other. The story of their first hustle together, whether it was small-time dealing, running corners, or just finding ways to make money in a rough environment, could be one of the most important early plot lines. It will show the roots of their partnership before the empire, before the betrayal, when everything was just about survival. Another storyline that feels inevitable is their connection with Kanan. In the original show, Kanan was introduced as Ghost and Tommy's mentor, the man who showed them how to move in the streets. But audiences never got to see those years. Power Origins is the chance to finally explore that dynamic in full. Kanan wasn't just a mentor. He was also a man with his own vision, his own ruthlessness, and his own demons. Watching how young Ghost learned from Kanan while also starting to think differently from him could create one of the most dramatic arcs of the series. It would explain why Ghost eventually separated himself, why he wanted to go legit, and why Kanan always saw him as someone who turned his back on the game. At the same time, Tommy's relationship with Kanan will likely be different. Tommy's raw loyalty and hunger for the streets meant he was more aligned with Kanan's style. That difference could begin planting the seeds of tension between Ghost and Tommy. Even in their teenage years, family drama also has to play a huge role. Ghost and Tommy were shaped not just by the streets, but by the homes they came from. Ghost's ambition to become more than just another hustler probably came from seeing limits in his family life, while Tommy's chaotic upbringing with his mother created his anger and recklessness. Power Origins has the space to dive into those family dynamics in ways the original series never did. Seeing Ghost clash with authority figures at home, or Tommy navigating a toxic relationship with his family, could explain why they leaned so heavily on each other. Their friendship was more than just business, it was survival. It was brotherhood. It was a replacement for the stability they didn't get at home. That emotional depth could add weight to every storyline, making it more than just another crime drama. The show could also explore their early rivalries. Every kingpin starts by fighting for corners, for respect, for recognition. Ghost and Tommy weren't born with power. They had to take it. That means running into other hustlers, rival crews, and dangerous enemies who wanted the same thing. These conflicts could create thrilling episodes filled with tension, action, and betrayals. At the same time, those rivalries would test Ghost and Tommy's loyalty to each other. Maybe they don't always agree on how to handle things. Maybe Ghost wants to think strategically while Tommy wants to react with violence. Those clashes will not only add drama, but will also foreshadow the cracks that eventually break their friendship years later. And then there's the potential to introduce younger versions of other major characters. Fans would love to see early glimpses of Tessa, Angela, or even future rivals who later become central to the Power universe. These cameos wouldn't just be fan service, they would enrich the backstory by showing how interconnected this world has always been. Imagine seeing Ghost meet Angela for the first time as a teenager, before their romance complicated everything in adulthood. Or watching how young Tasha's ambitions lined up with Ghost's vision, planting the seeds of a relationship that would later define so much of the story. Another powerful storyline could revolve around their first big score, the one that changed them from neighborhood hustlers to real players in the game. Every legend has an origin story, and Ghost and Tommy's first step into becoming something more than street kids could become a central arc of the first season. How they planned it, how they executed it, and how they dealt with the consequences could set the tone for the rest of the series. It would also show audiences how the two boys started building their empire brick by brick. What makes all these potential storylines so exciting is that fans already know the destination. Ghost becomes the man who tries to leave the streets behind, while Tommy becomes the man who lives for them. Their paths eventually split, but watching how those paths begin, how ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and love shaped them makes the journey just as thrilling as the ending. Power Origins doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. It just has to tell the stories we've always wanted but never got. And if it delivers on those storylines, it could easily become one of the strongest entries in the Power franchise.